Chief Instructor Garrett descended from the observation tower with deliberate steps, his boots striking the concrete with authority that carried across the range. He moved directly to Megan's position where she stood beside her rifle, the weapon still warm from the shot that had registered at 3,189 meters just moments before. The other candidates remained frozen in their positions along the firing line, 22 men watching as Garrett reached for Megan's rifle without requesting permission. He lifted the weapon, examined the scope mounting, checked the barrel alignment, then set on a shooting mat with unnecessary force. "Your windage calculations are off," he announced to the assembled candidates, though his eyes never left Megan. "Equipment this precise requires constant verification. We'll re-zero from baseline." Megan kept her expression neutral as Garrett personally adjusted her scope settings, his movements sharp and precise. He stepped back, gestured toward the target range. "Again," he said, "show us it wasn't equipment doing the work." She settled into position, controlled her breathing, calculated wind speed and direction from the flags positioned at intervals downrange. The trigger pull was smooth, the recoil familiar against her shoulder. The digital display updated within seconds. 3,189 meters. Confirmed kill. Garrett's jaw tightened, the muscle jumping beneath his skin. He turned to the three other SEAL instructors positioned in the observation tower. "Lunch break," he called out over the range loudspeaker. 90 minutes. All candidates to the mess area. Staff Sergeant Davis watched from his safety station as Garrett pulled instructors Williams, Chun, and Rodriguez aside near the base of the tower. Their voices carried on the wind, fragments reaching Davis where he stood updating his observation log. Garrett's hand moved in sharp gestures as he spoke. Davis caught 3 words clearly. "Public relations stunt." The candidates filed toward the mess area in clusters of 3 and 4, their conversations low and cautious. Megan walked alone, her gait steady despite the weight of attention from the men who had watched her second impossible shot. She chose a table near the windows, pulled her tablet from her gear bag, and opened her ballistics calculation program. Instructor Williams approached her table, his frame blocking the sunlight streaming through the windows. He pulled out the chair across from her, without invitation, and sat. "Your file says civilian competition background," he said. "Want to walk me through that?" Megan looked up from her tablet, met his eyes directly. "Started shooting at 14 with my father. He was Marine Corps infantry marksman for 12 years. We trained every weekend at ranges in Arizona and New Mexico." Williams leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Competition shooting is controlled environment. This is combat qualification. Different pressure entirely." "I understand the distinction," Megan replied. "That's why I'm here instead of at another competition." "What's your longest civilian shot?" 2,900 meters at the Precision Rifle Series Championship in Wyoming. Second place finish. Williams stood, the chair scraping against the floor. "We'll see how you handle stress shooting this afternoon." He walked away before she could respond. Davis had positioned himself near the mess entrance, where he could observe the interaction while appearing to review his safety checklist. He noted the time in his log. 12:37. Instructor Williams conducted unauthorized interview of candidate crews during scheduled break period. Questioning appeared confrontational rather than instructional. The afternoon session began with Garrett's voice over the loudspeaker, explaining the stress shooting protocol. Candidates would complete burpees between each shot, testing their ability to maintain accuracy while experiencing elevated heart rate and physical fatigue. Standard protocol called for 30 burpees between rounds. Garrett walked along the firing line, pausing at each candidate's position to assign their specific count. 30, he told the first man. 30, he told the second. When he reached Megan's position, his voice carried across the entire range. 60, we need to test your endurance under real pressure. Megan dropped to the mat without comment, began the burpees with controlled rhythm. 60 repetitions later, her breathing was elevated but steady as she took position behind her rifle. The shot registered at 1,800 meters, 8-inch grouping, well within qualification standards. A male candidate 3 positions down the line raised his hand. "Chief, This is unequal treatment. The protocols specify 30 burpees for all candidates during stress qualification. Garrett turned slowly, walked to the candidate's position. Your name? Petty Officer Brennan, Chief. Petty Officer Brennan, do you believe you're qualified to determine training protocols for Naval Special Warfare Sniper qualification? No, Chief, but the written standards clearly state. Garrett cut him off with a raised hand. You just volunteered yourself for removal from this course. Pack your gear and report to personnel within the hour. Anyone else want to question instructor authority? The firing line remained silent. Davis logged the incident with precise detail, noting time, participants, and Garrett's explicit threat. His documentation was building into something significant, though he couldn't yet see the full shape it would take. Evening formation assembled at 1700 hours, all candidates standing at attention in 3 rows. Garrett paced in front of them, his hands clasped behind his back. Candidate Cruz has demonstrated exceptional marksmanship under controlled conditions, he announced. Therefore, she will face additional qualification requirements to ensure her skills translate to combat scenarios. Night shooting exercises, adverse weather conditions, and extended duration evaluations will be added to her training schedule. These requirements are not standard protocol, but necessary for thorough assessment. Back in the barracks after formation, Megan stored her gear in her wall locker with methodical precision. 2 male candidates approached her bunk, their movements cautious. The taller one spoke first, his voice low enough that it wouldn't carry to other areas of the room. Your shooting is legitimate. Everyone knows it, but the instructors are looking for any reason to drop you from this course. They've already decided you don't belong here. The second candidate nodded. Brennan is getting processed out right now for speaking up. They'll do worse to you if they find an excuse. Megan closed her locker, turned to face them. I appreciate the warning, but I didn't come here to quit because the instructors have a problem with women in the program. The candidates exchanged glances, then returned to their own bunks without further comment. Davis completed his daily safety report in his small office adjacent to the barracks, the documentation now spanning 4 single-space pages. 23 separate incidents of discriminatory treatment in 2 days. The pattern was unmistakable, the intent clear. He saved the file with precise notation, backed it up to 3 separate locations, and prepared for whatever tomorrow would bring to the range where truth was being measured in meters and bias in burpees. Day 2 arrived with heavy fog rolling across the rifle range. Visibility reduced to less than 200 meters. Chief Instructor Garrett assembled the candidates at 06:15, 30 minutes earlier than the scheduled briefing time. Candidate Cruz, your first rotation this morning, he announced. Environmental conditions provide excellent combat simulation opportunity. Megan moved to her assigned firing position, checked her equipment in the dim pre-dawn light filtered through fog. The ammunition boxes beside her station bore different markings in the standard issue she'd used yesterday, but Garrett was already directing her to begin the qualification sequence. She loaded the first round, settled into position, calculated adjustments for the moisture-heavy air and limited visibility. The shot felt wrong the moment she squeezed the trigger. The spotters reported impact 43 meters left of target. She adjusted, fired again. 51 meters right. Third shot landed 38 meters low. The pattern made no sense given her calculations and the environmental factors she'd compensated for. Garrett's voice boomed across the range through the loudspeaker system. Yesterday's performance appears to have been beginner's luck, ladies and gentlemen. Real combat conditions separate genuine skill from fortunate circumstances. He paused, letting his words settle over the assembled candidates. Candidate Cruz, I strongly suggest you consider voluntary withdrawal from this program before you waste more of the Navy's time and resources. Megan remained in her shooting position, examining her rifle scope. Chief, I request permission to inspect my ammunition. Something is inconsistent with the ballistics I'm observing. Garrett descended from the observation tower, stopped 10 feet from her position. You do not get to question ammunition quality, candidate. You get to shoot what you're assigned and meet qualification standards. Continue your sequence. Staff Sergeant Davis stood at his safety observation post, binoculars trained on Megan's firing station. The ammunition boxes beside her position drew his attention. He zoomed in, noted the lot numbers stamped on the containers. They didn't match the standard military specification codes he'd verified during yesterday's range preparation. He lifted his observation log, made precise notation of the discrepancy, including box numbers and timestamp. Megan fired her remaining rounds, each one landing far from target despite her adjustments. Garrett called the morning session at 0700 hours, ordered range clearing procedures. As candidates moved to collect equipment and police their firing stations, Davis walked the line, conducting his standard safety verification. When he reached Megan's position, he bent to examine the ammunition containers with his back to the observation tower. 3 rounds remained in the box. He palmed them smoothly, transferred them to his cargo pocket, then continued his inspection walk as though finding nothing unusual. The rounds felt slightly different in weight, the casings not quite matching the standard issue texture he'd handled thousands of times during his 15 years supervising live fire exercises. Back in his safety station, Davis secured the rounds in a clear evidence bag, labeled it with date, time, location, and lot numbers. Then he pulled his personal phone from his locker and dialed Captain Morrison at Special Warfare Command Headquarters. The call connected on the second ring. "Captain Morrison, this is Staff Sergeant Davis from the Sniper Qualification Course. I need to report potential ammunition tampering and systematic discriminatory treatment of a candidate. The situation requires immediate command attention." Morrison's voice shifted from casual to sharp focus. "Explain the tampering allegation first." Davis detailed the ammunition lot number discrepancies, the impossible ballistic patterns in Megan's shooting, and the 3 rounds he'd secured as evidence. Then he summarized the documentation he'd compiled over 2 days, 23 incidents of unequal treatment, physical harassment, and explicit threats against candidates who questioned instructor authority. Morrison was silent for 5 seconds, processing the information. "Preserve all evidence and continue documentation without alerting the instructors to your observations. I'm ordering immediate preservation of all range equipment, ammunition inventory, and training records. Nobody touches anything without my direct authorization. I'll have Naval Criminal Investigative Service contacted within the hour." Davis ended the call, returned to his observation duties with his documentation, now carrying the weight of official command attention. The fog was lifting from the range, visibility improving, but the morning's events had clarified something far more important than target acquisition. The system had just mobilized against 4 instructors who thought they were above accountability. In the barracks, Megan stripped and cleaned her rifle with meticulous attention, checking every component for potential malfunction. She found nothing wrong. The weapon was performing exactly as designed, which meant the problem originated elsewhere in the equipment chain. She'd been shooting long enough to know when the fault wasn't hers. 2 candidates approached her bunk, the same men who'd warned her yesterday evening. The shorter one spoke quietly. "Everyone saw those shots this morning. Nobody believes you suddenly forgot how to shoot. Garrett's setting you up." Megan continued cleaning her rifle, her movements steady. "I know, but I didn't come here to quit, and I'm not giving them an excuse to drop me for insubordination. I'll document everything and follow proper channels." The taller candidate glanced toward the barracks entrance, then back to Megan. "Proper channels run through the same instructors who are targeting you. You think they'll file your complaints honestly?" She set down her cleaning rod, met his eyes directly. "Then I'll find channels that bypass them entirely. Every military installation has Inspector General access and NCIS presence. Discrimination and equipment tampering are federal offenses, not just training violations." The candidates nodded and returned to their bunks. Megan finished cleaning her weapon, logged the morning's ballistic data in her personal tablet with photographs of the impact patterns and detailed notes about the ammunition inconsistencies. If this situation escalated to formal investigation, she'd have her own evidence trail independent of whatever the instructors might claim in official reports. At the morning break, Instructor Williams gathered the candidates for a briefing on afternoon training schedule. We'll be conducting movement drills, transitioning between multiple firing positions under time constraints. This is where physical conditioning separates qualified snipers from range shooters who can't perform under operational stress. He looked directly at Megan as he continued. Some candidates may find that exceptional marksmanship from static positions doesn't translate to dynamic combat scenarios. We'll discover who has genuine capability and who's been benefiting from control conditions. Davis logged the statement, noting the implied threat and the continued pattern of targeting one specific candidate while maintaining plausible deniability through general address to the group. His documentation was approaching 30 pages, each incident time-stamped and described with precision that would survive any legal scrutiny. Captain Morrison sat in his office at Special Warfare Command, phone pressed to his ear as he spoke with NCIS Agent Torres. The evidence suggests premeditated discrimination and possible equipment tampering. My safety observer has secured physical evidence and compiled detailed documentation. This needs priority response. Torres asked about the specifics, then confirmed he'd be on site within 90 minutes to begin formal investigation. Morrison ended the call and opened the personnel files for Chief Instructor Garrett and his 3 fellow instructors. What he found in Garrett's recent activity made the picture suddenly clear. 3 weeks before Megan's course began, Garrett had filed a formal complaint about diversity initiative pressures compromising training standards. The timing wasn't coincidence. It was premeditation. Chief Instructor Garrett called Megan to the instructor office at 10:15 hours. His summons delivered through Instructor Williams, who found her reviewing ballistics data in the barracks during the mid-morning break. The office was small, dominated by a metal desk covered with training schedules and qualification score sheets. Garrett sat behind the desk, Instructors Williams and Chun flanking him on either side. Candidate Cruz, your performance has fallen significantly below minimum qualification standards, Garrett began without preamble. Based on your failure to meet basic marksmanship requirements during adverse conditions, you're being dropped from this course effective immediately. Megan remained at attention, her voice level. Chief, I request formal review of that decision. Training regulations require written documentation of deficiencies and access to the appeal process before course removal. Garrett leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. There is no appeal process for candidates in probationary status. You have 2 hours to pack your gear and report to base personnel for reassignment processing. Dismissed. I'd like clarification on the probationary status designation, Megan said. My acceptance letter confirmed full candidate standing upon arrival. When was my status changed to probationary? And where is that documentation? Garrett stood, placed both hands on the desk. You're questioning my authority now? That alone is grounds for immediate removal. Get your gear and get off my range. Megan's phone sat in her cargo pocket, audio recording application activated before she'd entered the office. The device captured every word of the exchange, timestamp embedded in the file. She turned and left the office without further comment, walked directly to the barracks where the other candidates were beginning afternoon equipment preparation. She moved to her wall locker, began removing her gear with deliberate precision. The other candidates watched in silence, some looking away, others staring openly. The 2 men who'd warned her previously approached quietly. This is wrong, the taller one said. Everyone knows it. Megan folded her uniform shirts, placed them in her duffel. Then everyone should document what they've witnessed. If command investigates this situation, they'll need witnesses willing to make statements on record. Staff Sergeant Davis received the alert from Captain Morrison at 10:45 hours. Observe any separation proceedings involving candidate Cruz. Do not intervene, but maintain visual confirmation of all actions. Document everything. Davis left his safety station immediately, headed toward the barracks area where protocol required separated candidates to be escorted from the facility. He arrived as Garrett and Williams emerged from the instructor building, walked toward the barracks with a purposeful stride of men executing an unpleasant but necessary duty. Davis positioned himself near the barracks entrance, clipboard in hand, as though conducting routine facility inspection. His actual attention focused entirely on the two instructors. Inside the barracks, Megan zipped her duffel closed, shouldered her rifle case, and turned toward the exit. Garrett and Williams entered through the main door, blocked her path. "Transport vehicle is waiting outside," Garrett said. "You'll be taken to personnel processing immediately. No stops, no delays." They walked on either side of her, not quite touching but close enough to establish control. As they passed Davis near the entrance, Megan made eye contact with him, then slipped a folded paper from her pocket and pressed it into his hand in a movement so smooth it appeared accidental. She whispered 2 words: "Audio evidence." Davis palmed the paper, maintained his inspection posture until the 3 of them had moved past him toward the transport vehicle idling in the parking area. Once they were 30 feet away, he unfolded the paper. Megan's handwriting detailed ammunition lot numbers from a morning shooting, timestamps of discriminatory incidents, and a note that her phone contained full audio recording of the separation meeting. He pulled his own phone, dialed Morrison immediately. "Captain, separation in progress. Candidate crews being transported to personnel within minutes. She's passed evidence documentation to me, including audio recording of the separation order." Morrison's response was instant. "Get to the main gate security checkpoint. I'm calling ahead to have that vehicle stopped. Nobody leaves this base until NCIS arrives." Davis moved quickly toward the gate, watching the transport vehicle navigate the facility roads ahead of him. He reached the security checkpoint as the vehicle approached, saw the gate guard step into the road with hands raised. The vehicle stopped. In Morrison's office, the captain issued rapid orders through multiple phone calls. Base security received instructions to return candidate crews to temporary holding in the administration building. NCIS agent Torres received notification to expedite his arrival. The range ammunition storage received orders that all containers were now evidence, sealed pending investigation. Morrison reviewed the documentation Davis had forwarded earlier, now supplemented by the ammunition lot numbers Megan had documented. He cross-referenced them against base ammunition inventory records. The lot numbers she'd recorded didn't exist in any official Navy ammunition procurement database. Someone had brought commercial ammunition onto the range and substituted it for military specification rounds. NCIS agent Torres arrived at 11:30 hours, his credentials verified by base security before Morrison met him at the administration building entrance. Inside a conference room, Torres spread Davis's documentation across the table alongside the 3 ammunition rounds secured as evidence and the lot number information from Megan. "This is substantial preliminary evidence," Torres said. "I need immediate access to range security footage, complete ammunition inventory, and all training records from the past week. Also, I want those 4 instructors confined to quarters pending investigation. Nobody talks to them. Nobody warns them we're looking." Morrison made the calls, issued the orders with the authority of a captain who understood that careers were about to end. Within 30 minutes, military police had delivered verbal confinement orders to Garrett, Williams, Chun, and Rodriguez. All 4 were restricted to their quarters, forbidden from accessing the range or communicating with candidates. Garrett stood in his quarters when the military police delivered Morrison's order, reading the single page that confined him pending investigation into allegations of discrimination and evidence tampering. His confident posture from a morning dissolved, replaced by the rigid stance of a man realizing that his actions had been documented, witnessed, and reported through channels he couldn't control or influence. What investigation? He demanded of the MPs. What evidence? The senior MP shook his head. We're not authorized to discuss details. You're confined to quarters. Captain Morrison will contact you when required. After the MPs left, Garrett sat on his bunk, replaying the past 2 days in his mind. The ammunition swap had been subtle, executed during his early morning range preparation when the safety station was unoccupied. The unequal treatment had been carefully phrased to sound like legitimate training rigor. The separation order had followed established procedures for probationary candidates, a status he'd assigned Megan in internal documentation without her knowledge. But someone had been watching. Someone had been documenting. Someone had collected physical evidence and reported through channels that bypassed his authority entirely. His confidence that he could shape this situation to his narrative crumbled as he understood that the narrative was already being written by others, with evidence he couldn't refute and witnesses he couldn't silence. NCIS agent Torres spent the afternoon in the range security office, reviewing 14 hours of footage across 4 different camera angles. The digital files showed the entire facility from multiple perspectives, time-stamped and archived automatically every 24 hours. He focused on the early morning hours of day 2, before candidates arrived for the fog-covered qualification session. At 05:47 hours, Chief Instructor Garrett appeared on camera, entering the ammunition storage building. He carried no paperwork, wore no safety vest required for ammunition handling, moved with the casual confidence of someone who believed he was unobserved. Torres watched as Garrett emerged 6 minutes later, carrying 2 boxes, walked directly to the firing line, and placed them at the station assigned to candidate crews. Torres reversed the footage, watched it again at half speed. Garrett had swapped the boxes, removing the military specification ammunition and replacing it with containers that bore similar markings but came from his personal vehicle parked near the storage building. The agent captured screenshots of 4 separate angles showing the exchange, saved them with precise timestamp notation. He moved to the ballistics laboratory, where the 3 rounds Davis had secured were undergoing analysis. The technician looked up from her microscope, pulled off her safety glasses. "These aren't military specification ammunition," she said without preamble. "Commercial manufacture, lighter powder load, different cartridge composition entirely. They'd shoot significantly different from standard Navy rounds." Torres documented her findings, requested written report with full technical specifications. Then he returned to the administration building where Captain Morrison had arranged interview space. 8 candidates from the sniper course waited in the hallway, called individually for private questioning. The first candidate, a petty officer named Martinez, entered the interview room and sat across from Torres. "Tell me what you observed during candidate Cruz's training over the past 2 days." Martinez detailed the unequal burpee assignments, the public humiliation attempts, the additional qualification requirements announced without precedent. He described Garrett's comments about diversity initiatives and his visible frustration each time Megan succeeded despite the obstacles. His statement took 23 minutes, each incident described with specific details about time, location, and witnesses. Torres interviewed 7 more candidates over 3 hours. 5 provided statements consistent with Martinez's account, describing a systematic pattern of discriminatory treatment targeting one candidate while maintaining facade of legitimate training standards. 2 candidates claimed they'd observed nothing unusual, their responses careful and rehearsed. One candidate, Petty Officer Chun, provided additional evidence Torres hadn't anticipated. "I recorded part of an instructor conversation on my phone," he said. "Day 1, after candidate Cruz's first shot. Chief Garrett was talking to the other instructors about needing to break her before she made them look bad. I was doing equipment maintenance nearby and had my phone out for a music app. The recording caught about 90 seconds of their discussion. Torres secured the phone, extracted the audio file, listened to Garrett's voice clearly stating that Cruz's performance was making the instructor staff appear inadequate and that they needed to find ways to demonstrate she wasn't qualified for the program. The recording timestamp showed 1 hour after Megan's record-breaking first shot. Staff Sergeant Davis arrived at the interview room carrying his complete safety observation logs, now expanded to 37 pages of detailed documentation. Torres reviewed the logs methodically, noting the progression from initial unequal treatment through escalating harassment to the attempted separation. Every incident included timestamp, location, witnesses, and specific actions taken by instructors. "This is exceptional documentation," Torres told Davis. "Most witnesses provide vague recollections. You build a timeline that's forensically precise. Davis nodded. 15 years supervising live fire exercises teaches you that details matter when investigating safety violations or misconduct. I started logging when I noticed the pattern emerging. By day 2, I knew this was heading toward formal investigation. Torres compiled the evidence into comprehensive packages. Security footage showing ammunition tampering with clear facial identification and timestamps. Ballistics analysis confirming substituted commercial rounds. Audio recording of Garrett discussing need to break the candidate. Written statements from 5 witnesses describing systematic discrimination. Davis's detailed safety logs documenting 23 separate incidents. Megan's personal documentation, including lot numbers and audio of the separation order. He reviewed the evidence with Morrison at 1800 hours, both men understanding they were looking at federal charges rather than simple military discipline matters. Tampering with military equipment during training operations, Morrison said. Discrimination based on gender. Obstruction of justice through attempted unauthorized separation. Civil rights violations. This goes to court-martial with criminal referral potential. Torres agreed. The premeditation is clear from the timeline. Garrett filed his complaint about diversity initiatives 3 weeks before crews arrived. He planned this systematic harassment from the start. The ammunition tampering shows calculation rather than impulse. We have him on multiple felonies. Morrison made the next call to the staff judge advocate, the base legal officer who would coordinate court-martial proceedings. The SJA reviewed the evidence summary Torres provided, asked clarifying questions about chain of custody for physical evidence and authentication of audio recordings. After 30 minutes of discussion, he confirmed that formal charges were warranted and that preliminary hearing could be scheduled within 2 weeks. While Morrison and Torres coordinated the legal response, word spread through the base using the informal communication channels that exist in every military installation. Candidates from the sniper course told their friends in other units. Security personnel who'd stopped the transport vehicle shared the story during shift change. Administrative staff who'd processed the confinement orders discussed it over dinner. By 2000 hours, most personnel on base knew that 4 SEAL instructors had been confined pending investigation for discrimination and evidence tampering against a female candidate. In the administration building, Megan sat in a temporary holding room that resembled a small office more than a cell. Captain Morrison had arranged for her gear to be retrieved from the transport vehicle and returned to her custody. She'd spent the afternoon writing detailed statement of everything she'd experienced, cross-referencing her personal documentation and ensuring her account matched the physical evidence she'd secured. A knock at the door preceded Morrison's entrance. He carried a folder containing preliminary investigation findings. Candidate Cruz, all charges against you are dropped. You're being reinstated to the sniper qualification course with full candidate status. The investigation has confirmed systematic discrimination and evidence tampering by Chief Instructor Garrett and potential involvement by 3 other instructors. Megan stood, accepted the folder, read through Morrison's summary of the evidence. What happens to my qualification scores from day 1? Morrison pulled 2 sheets from his briefcase. Both shots are officially recorded. 3,247 meters and 3,189 meters. Both are facility records. Your performance is documented and will be recognized in your training file. He paused, then continued. I'm assigning Commander Peterson as new lead instructor for your course. He's former SEAL Team 3 with 18 years sniper experience. He's also someone who evaluates candidates based on performance rather than demographics. You'll restart training tomorrow morning with clean slate. Commander Peterson arrived at the range at 0600 hours, 3 hours before the scheduled training resumption. He walked the firing line with deliberate attention, examining each station's equipment setup and sight lines to target areas. His reputation preceded him through channels both official and informal. SEAL Team 3 combat veteran, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, where his longest confirmed kill stood at 2,800 meters, and a training philosophy that measured candidates against standards rather than stereotypes. He found Staff Sergeant Davis in the safety observation station, reviewing updated protocols Morrison had implemented overnight. The new requirements included mandatory body cameras for all instructors, independent safety observers monitoring each training evolution, and standardized evaluation criteria that eliminated instructor discretion for adding requirements beyond established core standards. Davis, Peterson said, extending his hand. Captain Morrison briefed me on your documentation work. That level of detail prevented this situation from being buried. Davis shook his hand. Just doing my job, Commander. Safety observation includes watching for threats to candidates, whether those threats come from equipment malfunctions or instructor misconduct. Peterson nodded, gestured toward the firing line. Walk me through what happened during Cruz's first day. I want to understand the full context before candidates arrive. They moved along the range as Davis reconstructed the timeline, pointing to specific locations where events had occurred. Peterson listened without interrupting. His questions focused on technical details about ammunition, equipment setup, and the precise nature of Garrett's interventions. When Davis finished, Peterson stood silent for 30 seconds, processing the information. 3,247 meters on a first shot isn't luck, Peterson finally said. That's skill combined with natural aptitude. Garrett's response tells me he recognized genuine talent and viewed it as threat rather than asset. At 0800 hours, the candidates assembled for formation. Peterson stood before them, his posture relaxed but authoritative. I'm Commander Peterson, your new lead instructor. Chief Garrett and 3 other instructors are no longer associated with this program, pending legal proceedings. We're implementing new training protocols effective immediately. He outlined the changes Morrison had authorized, explaining each modification's purpose without explicitly referencing the discrimination that had necessitated them. Then he shifted topics. Candidate Cruz demonstrated exceptional marksmanship during her initial evaluation. Both shots are officially recognized as facility records. Today, she'll resume training under the same standards that apply to every candidate in this course. No additional requirements, no special scrutiny, no different treatment in any direction. She succeeds or fails based on her performance against established criteria. The candidates remained at attention, their expressions carefully neutral. Peterson dismissed them to equipment preparation, then walked to where Megan stood near her assigned gear locker. Cruz, he said, his voice pitched for her alone. I reviewed your shooting data from day one. Your calculations were precise, your form was textbook, and your results speak for themselves. I'm here to ensure you get fair evaluation. Everything else is up to you. Megan met his eyes directly. Thank you, Commander. That's all I'm asking for. The morning training session focused on environmental adaptation, teaching candidates to adjust calculations for temperature variations, humidity changes, and altitude differences. Peterson moved among the firing positions, offering technical corrections with explanations rather than criticisms. When he reached Megan's station, he observed her sight picture, checked her breathing rhythm, and nodded approval. Your fundamentals are solid, he said. Try increasing your hold time by 2 seconds. At extreme range, that extra stability makes significant difference. Megan adjusted her technique, fired. The shot registered at 2,200 meters, dead center of target. Peterson marked her score sheet, moved to the next candidate without additional comment. The lack of special attention was itself a statement that every candidate recognized. During the lunch break, Captain Morrison conducted the formal notification meeting with Chief Garrett. NCIS Agent Torres sat beside Morrison, his presence adding federal weight to the proceedings. Base Legal Officer Lieutenant Commander Hayes completed the trio, ensuring every procedural requirement was met with precision that would survive appellate review. Garrett entered Morrison's office, his uniform crisp despite 2 days of confinement. He sat across the desk, his expression controlled, but his eyes showing the strain of waiting without information. Torres opened his laptop, turned it to face Garrett. This is security footage from 05:47 hours, day 2 of the current training cycle. He pressed play, let Garrett watch himself enter the ammunition storage, emerge with boxes, walk to Megan's firing position, swap containers. Garrett's face remained impassive as he watched, but his hands tightened on the chair arms. Torres continued. Ballistics analysis confirms the ammunition you placed at Candidate Cruz's station was commercial manufacture, not military specification. 3 witnesses provided statements describing your comments about needing to break Cruz before she made the instructor staff look bad. We have audio recording of you ordering her separation without following mandatory appeal procedures. Lieutenant Commander Hayes opened a folder, read from prepared statement. Chief Petty Officer Garrett, you are being formally charged with tampering with military training equipment under Article 108 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Discrimination based on gender in violation of federal civil rights statutes, obstruction of justice through attempted unauthorized separation of a trainee, and conduct unbecoming a non-commissioned officer. Court-martial proceedings will commence within 14 days. You have right to military legal counsel and all protections afforded under UCMJ. Garrett found his voice, though it emerged with less authority than he'd carried 2 days earlier. The ammunition swap was equipment reliability testing. Standard instructor protocol for evaluating candidate response to unexpected conditions. Torres pulled up additional footage showing Garrett's personal vehicle, timestamped showing him loading ammunition boxes from civilian packaging into military-style containers the evening before the swap. This footage shows premeditation, not spontaneous training adaptation. Combined with your documented complaint about diversity initiatives 3 weeks before Cruz arrived, the pattern demonstrates systematic planning rather than legitimate instruction. Morrison leaned forward, his tone shifting from procedural to personal. I've reviewed your service record, Garrett. 15 years of distinguished performance. Multiple commendations. Respected by peers and subordinates. What happened here wasn't about training standards or qualification rigor. It was about you deciding that one candidate didn't belong before she ever fired a shot. Garrett's controlled expression cracked slightly. She's a public relations insertion. Command pressured the selection board to accept female candidates regardless of actual qualification. I was protecting the integrity of this program. Morrison shook his head. She qualified through the same selection process as every other candidate. Her civilian competition record shows years of documented performance at the highest levels. Your decision to target her had nothing to do with her qualifications and everything to do with your assumption that women can't perform at SEAL standards. That assumption just destroyed your career. Torres added the final element. Instructors Williams, Chun, and Rodriguez are also facing charges, though less severe than yours. They participated in the discriminatory treatment pattern and failed to report your ammunition tampering. All 4 of you are relieved of instructor duties effective immediately. Your pay grade will be reduced pending court-martial outcome. The meeting concluded with Garrett being escorted back to his quarters by military police. Morrison and Torres remained in the office, reviewing the next steps in the legal process. The court-martial would be swift, the evidence overwhelming, the outcome predetermined by facts that couldn't be disputed or explained away. Commander Peterson returned to the range that afternoon, finding Megan completing her equipment maintenance in the shadow of the observation tower. The other candidates had dispersed to their various post-training routines, leaving the firing line empty except for the 2 of them and the distant figure of Staff Sergeant Davis securing the ammunition storage. I want to try something, Peterson said. Follow me. They walked to the far end of the range where targets had been positioned at the facility's maximum distance. 3,500 meters. The longest shot capability the range infrastructure supported. Peterson pointed to the target barely visible even through high-powered optics. Your first day record was 32.47. I reviewed the ballistics data and environmental conditions from that shot. Based on the calculations, you had capacity for greater distance, but were limited by assigned target placement. I want to see what you can do with full range available. Megan studied the target through her scope, calculated wind speed from the flags positioned at intervals, factored in the afternoon temperature that had risen 12 degrees since morning. She adjusted her position, checked her breathing, made minute corrections to elevation and windage. The shot broke clean. 4 seconds later, the digital display updated. 3,511 meters. Confirmed kill. Peterson photographed the display screen with his phone, then keyed his radio. "Davis, did you observe that shot from safety station?" Davis's voice came back immediately. "Confirmed, Commander. 3511 at 15:23 hours. New facility record." Peterson turned to Megan. "That shot just became your official qualification benchmark. Tomorrow morning, you'll demonstrate it again for formal certification with full observer documentation. If you can replicate that performance, you'll hold the longest certified training shot in naval special warfare history." The next morning brought clear skies and optimal shooting conditions. Morrison had arranged for additional witnesses beyond the standard training staff. Master Chief Thompson from SEAL Team 5 attended, along with 2 senior instructors from other special operations training commands. The gathering served dual purposes: official certification of Megan's capability and demonstration to the broader special operations community that the discrimination case hadn't been manufactured to protect an underperforming candidate. Megan took her position at 0900 hours, the assembled observers maintaining position behind the firing line. She ran through her pre-shot routine with the same methodical precision she'd demonstrated since arriving at the course. The mathematics of extreme-range shooting required accounting for dozens of variables, each calculation building on the previous one until the final firing solution emerged. Peterson stood beside Master Chief Thompson, both men watching through high-powered observation equipment. Thompson had been skeptical when Morrison first described the situation, suspecting that command had overreacted to legitimate training standards. Watching Megan work changed his assessment. "She's not guessing," Thompson said quietly. "Every adjustment is deliberate. She's calculating bullet drop, wind drift, Coriolis effect, and atmospheric density in real time." Peterson nodded. 3 years of civilian competition trained her to process those variables instinctively. Add natural talent and intensive practice, and you get someone who can shoot at this level on their first week in military training. Megan fired. The round traveled for 4.3 seconds before impact. The digital display confirmed the shot at 3,504 meters, 7 meters shorter than yesterday's performance, but well within acceptable variance for environmental differences between the 2 days. Thompson lowered his observation equipment, turned to Peterson. "That's legitimate capability. No question about it." He walked to Morrison, who stood near the observation tower entrance. "Captain, my initial concerns about this situation are resolved. Cruz has the skill. Garrett had the prejudice. The investigation was warranted." Morrison shook his hand. "Appreciate you taking time to observe, Master Chief. We wanted senior operators to see firsthand that our response was based on evidence rather than politics." Over the following week, Peterson integrated Megan fully into the standard training cycle without special accommodation or additional scrutiny. She completed stress shooting exercises, night operations, adverse weather qualifications, and movement drills. Her performance remained consistently in the top quartile of the candidate class, with several exercises placing her first overall. The other candidates adapted to treating her as peer rather than anomaly. The 2 men who'd initially warned her about instructor targeting became regular training partners, sharing techniques and offering critique that improved everyone's performance. Petty Officer Martinez, who'd provided early witness statement to NCIS, admitted during a break that he'd initially doubted whether women belonged in combat specialties, but that watching Megan's capability had changed his perspective. "I grew up believing certain jobs required masculine physical characteristics," Martinez told her during a lunch break. "Your shooting proved that marksmanship is about precision and calculation, not strength. Made me question a lot of assumptions I'd never examined before." Megan appreciated the honesty. "Change happens one person at a time," she replied. "The system can implement policies, but individuals have to choose whether to evaluate people based on performance or prejudice." While training continued, NCIS Agent Torres completed his investigation with methodical thoroughness. He interviewed 12 additional witnesses from the base community, including range maintenance personnel who'd observed Garrett's unusual early morning range access patterns and administrative staff who'd processed his diversity initiative complaint. Each interview added depth to the evidence package that would support court-martial prosecution. Torres also investigated the 3 other instructors who'd been confined pending review. Williams and Chun had actively participated in discriminatory treatment, making disparaging comments about female candidates and imposing unequal physical requirements during training exercises. Rodriguez had witnessed the discrimination without participating directly, but had failed his legal obligation to report misconduct when he observed it. Torres recommended formal charges against all 3, though lesser severity than the felonies Garrett faced. The investigation expanded beyond the immediate incident when Torres discovered pattern evidence in historical training records. Over the previous 2 years, 4 other female candidates had attempted the sniper qualification course. All 4 had been dropped before completion, each citing hostile training environment and discriminatory treatment in their withdrawal statements. The statements have been filed and forgotten, treated as inevitable complaints from candidates who couldn't handle training rigor. Torres brought the historical records to Morrison's attention. This was an isolated incident, he said. Garrett and his instructor team had systematically excluded female candidates for years. Cruz was different because she had undeniable skill, contemporary witnesses willing to report, and safety observer who documented everything in real time. Without those factors, she'd have been dropped like the others with no investigation. Morrison reviewed the historical files, his expression darkening. We need to contact those 4 women. Offer them opportunity to provide statements if they want their experiences included in the court-martial evidence. They deserve acknowledgement that they were right about what happened to them. Torres made the contacts over the following days. 3 of the 4 women agreed to provide statements describing their experiences. Their accounts detailed the same pattern Megan had encountered: unequal physical requirements, public humiliation, equipment issues that mysteriously appeared during their shooting sessions, and eventual separation justified through vague references to inability to meet standards. The pattern evidence transformed the case from individual discrimination incident into systemic civil rights violation. Military legal authorities discussed potential criminal referral to Department of Justice for prosecution under federal civil rights statutes. The case had implications beyond 4 instructors at one training facility. It raised questions about how many other training programs across military services had similar patterns hidden in administrative files. The court-martial convened on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the initial incident, held in the base legal building's primary courtroom. The military judge, Captain Sandra Williams, presided over proceedings that would determine whether Chief Petty Officer Garrett's 15-year career would end in confinement and dishonorable discharge or some lesser punishment that might preserve fragments of his service record. The prosecution team consisted of 2 experienced military lawyers who'd spent the intervening weeks organizing the evidence into a presentation designed for maximum clarity and minimum possibility of procedural error. Defense counsel had attempted multiple pre-trial motions to suppress evidence, particularly the security footage and audio recordings, arguing various technical violations of Garrett's rights. Captain Williams had denied every motion, finding the evidence collection lawful and the chain of custody properly maintained. Opening statements established the fundamental disagreement that would define the trial. Prosecution argued premeditated discrimination and evidence tampering by instructor who decided before training began that female candidate didn't belong in the program. Defense claimed zealous enforcement of legitimate training standards by dedicated, non-commissioned officer concerned about political pressure compromising operational readiness. The prosecution's first witness was Staff Sergeant Davis, who took the stand carrying his safety observation logs. The lead prosecutor, Lieutenant Commander Hayes, walked Davis through the timeline of incidents he'd documented over the 2-day period before official intervention. "Describe what you observed on the first day of candidate Cruz's training," Hayes said. Davis detailed the record-breaking shot, Garrett's immediate claim of equipment malfunction despite verified accuracy, and the mandatory reservoing that produced similarly exceptional results. He described the unequal burpee assignments during stress shooting, the threat against Petty Officer Brennan for questioning discriminatory treatment, and the announcement of additional qualification requirements applied exclusively to one candidate. Hayes introduced Davis's logs as evidence. Each page projected on courtroom screens for the panel of 5 officers who would render verdict. The documentation showed 37 distinct incidents across 2 days, each time-stamped and described with specificity that eliminated ambiguity about what had occurred. Defense counsel cross-examined Davis aggressively, attempting to establish that his documentation reflected personal interpretation rather than objective observation. The effort failed against Davis's 15 years of safety observer experience and his methodical separation of factual description from analytical conclusion in his reports. The second witness was NCIS Agent Torres, who presented the security footage showing Garrett entering ammunition storage, swapping boxes at Megan's firing station, and returning to normal duties. Torres narrated the footage with technical precision, identifying Garrett through facial recognition software, confirming timestamps through multiple synchronized cameras, and establishing that the substituted ammunition came from Garrett's personal vehicle rather than official inventory. The ballistics analysis followed, presented by the Navy laboratory technician who'd examined the 3 rounds Davis had secured. She explained how commercial ammunition differed from military specification, demonstrated the impact on accuracy at extreme range, and confirmed through chemical analysis that the rounds came from civilian rather than military manufacturing. Defense counsel attempted to argue that ammunition testing represented legitimate instructor methodology for evaluating candidate response to equipment variation. Torres countered by displaying additional footage showing Garrett loading civilian ammunition from commercial packaging into military-style containers the evening before the swap, demonstrating premeditation rather than spontaneous training decision. The panel watched silently as evidence accumulated, each piece reinforcing the prosecution narrative of systematic discrimination executed through seemingly legitimate training actions. The audio recording of Garrett discussing need to break crews before she made instructors look bad eliminated any remaining defense argument about innocent intentions. Megan testified on the trial's second day, walking the panel through her experience from arrival through attempted separation. She described Garrett's comment during initial briefing about diversity initiatives, the immediate equipment malfunction claim after her record shot, the doubled physical requirements during stress shooting, and the separation order delivered without appeal process. Defense counsel cross-examined her about her civilian competition background, attempting to establish that she'd arrived at military training with inflated confidence and unrealistic expectations about how operators would respond to female presence in combat specialties. Megan's responses remained measured and factual, acknowledging that she'd expected challenges while maintaining that discrimination and evidence tampering weren't among the legitimate challenges inherent in difficult training. The 3 former female candidates who'd previously attempted the course testified via video conference, each describing experiences that mirrored Megan's. Unequal treatment, public humiliation, mysterious equipment issues, and eventual separation justified through vague references to failure to meet standards. Their testimony established pattern rather than isolated incident, showing that Garrett's actions represented systematic exclusion practiced over multiple years. Petty Officer Martinez and 4 other male candidates testified about what they'd witnessed, their statements consistent with Davis's documentation. Martinez described the moment Garrett threatened Brennan with removal for questioning unequal treatment, noting that the threat silenced other candidates who'd been considering similar objections. The defense called Garrett to testify on his own behalf, a decision made necessary by the overwhelming prosecution evidence. He maintained that his actions reflected commitment to training standards rather than discrimination, arguing that Cruz's exceptional shooting actually raised legitimate questions about whether she'd received improper pre-training access to the facility or equipment. Under cross-examination, Prosecution demolished this argument by presenting Garrett's documented complaint about diversity initiatives filed 3 weeks before Cruz arrived, before he could have had any information about her actual capabilities. Hayes then displayed Garrett's own service record showing that no male candidate in the previous 5 years had faced additional qualification requirements beyond standard course protocols, eliminating the defense claim that Cruz's treatment represented normal practice. The panel deliberated for 90 minutes, a relatively brief period given the evidence volume. When they returned, the senior member stood to announce findings. On the charge of tampering with military training equipment, guilty. On the charge of discrimination based on gender, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice through unauthorized separation attempt, guilty. On the charge of conduct unbecoming, guilty. Captain Williams announced sentencing after brief recess to review guidelines and precedent. Reduction in rank to E1, the lowest enlisted grade. Confinement for 18 months at Regional Military Correctional Facility. Forfeiture of all pay and allowances during confinement period. Dishonorable discharge upon completion of sentence. Garrett stood at attention as sentence was delivered, his expression revealing nothing. 15 years of service ending with the worst possible discharge status, permanent mark that would follow him through civilian life, preventing access to veterans' benefits, and creating barriers to employment that required background checks. Later that afternoon, Morrison convened non-judicial punishment proceedings for instructors Williams, Chun, and Rodriguez. The evidence against them showed participation in discriminatory treatment and failure to report misconduct, but lacked the premeditation and evidence tampering that had elevated Garrett's actions to court-martial level. Each received reduction in rank by 2 grades, 45 days restriction to base, and permanent removal from instructor duty. Their service records would show the disciplinary action, limiting future advancement opportunities, but they would avoid court-martial convictions and dishonorable discharge. Megan completed week 6 of the 8-week sniper qualification course on the Thursday, following the court-martial verdict. Commander Peterson had maintained standard training pace throughout the legal proceedings, ensuring that candidates stayed focused on skill development rather than becoming distracted by the drama unfolding in the courtroom. The approach worked. Course performance metrics showed improvement across the entire candidate class, with several shooters posting personal records during the weeks when their discriminatory instructors faced consequences. Peterson called Megan to his office during the lunch break, a small space that overlooked the rifle range where she'd broken facility records twice in her first 3 days. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, waited until she sat before speaking. "Your overall course performance places you first in class rankings," he said without preamble. Average shot placement of 3,156 meters across all qualification exercises. Highest scores on night shooting, adverse weather operations, and stress conditions. You've demonstrated consistency that most candidates take years to develop. Megan absorbed the information without visible reaction. "Thank you, Commander. I've learned significant amount from your instruction approach." Peterson pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "I've been authorized to offer you assignment choice upon course completion. Normally, graduates receive orders based on needs of the service with minimal input. In your case, given the circumstances surrounding your training and the attention this situation has generated at senior command levels, you have option to select from 3 available positions." He spread 3 assignment sheets across the desk. "First option is instructor duty here at this facility. We're rebuilding the training program culture, and having you as part of that transformation would send powerful message about merit-based evaluation. Second option is assignment to West Coast SEAL Team as sniper element. Third option is special operations training pipeline with potential path to more specialized units." Megan studied the 3 options, processing implications of each choice. Instructor duty would establish visible presence that might prevent future discrimination. SEAL Team assignment would prove capability in operational environment. Special operations pipeline would push her skills to their absolute limits, while opening doors to the most elite units in military service. "I want the special operations pipeline," she said. "I didn't come here to be a symbol or make political statement. I came here to see how far my capabilities can take me in combat specialties." Peterson nodded approval. "That's the right answer. Symbolic representation matters, but operators respect demonstrated capability more than any diversity initiative. You'll start pipeline training in 6 weeks, after you complete this course, and take brief leave period." The following week brought another significant development when Captain Morrison convened meeting in his office with representatives from Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters. 3 senior officers sat around Morrison's conference table, reviewing comprehensive report on the discrimination case and its implications for training programs across the special operations community. "Captain Morrison, Commander Peterson, we appreciate your decisive action on this situation," said Rear Admiral Thompson, the senior special warfare officer present. "The investigation revealed systemic issues that extend beyond one facility. We're implementing service-wide reforms to ensure this pattern doesn't continue elsewhere." Morrison listened as Thompson outlined the changes. Mandatory body cameras for all instructors at special operations training facilities. Independent safety observers with direct reporting authority to command level. Standardized evaluation criteria that eliminate instructor discretion for adding requirements beyond established protocols. Anonymous reporting system for discrimination complaints with mandatory NCIS referral, bypassing chain of command. Quarterly audits of training records to identify patterns of disproportionate candidate separation. Thompson continued, "We're also establishing review board to examine historical cases where female candidates were separated from special operations training. Any case showing patterns similar to what Garrett practiced will trigger retroactive investigation and potential offer for candidates to return to training if they choose." The reforms represented comprehensive response to institutional failure, transforming procedures that had relied on instructor integrity into systems with built-in accountability and oversight. Implementation would require significant resources and culture change, but the alternative was allowing discrimination to continue hidden behind claims of maintaining standards. Peterson raised practical concern. "These reforms are necessary, but we need to ensure they don't create perception that standards are being lowered. Operational units need confidence that graduates meet legitimate capability requirements regardless of demographic background." Thompson agreed. "Standards remain unchanged. What changes is the accountability structure ensuring standards are applied equally. Crews prove that women can meet SEAL sniper standards when evaluated fairly. The question now is how many other capable candidates were excluded through bias rather than legitimate performance assessment." Megan completed her final qualification exercise on a Friday morning 6 weeks after her initial record-breaking shot. The exercise combined all skills developed throughout the course: extreme range marksmanship, stress shooting, night operations, and movement between positions under time constraints. She executed each element with precision that reflected weeks of intensive training under Peterson's instruction. The final shot of her qualification sequence traveled 3,473 meters, placing dead center of target in conditions that included 15 mph crosswind and late afternoon temperature inversion. Peterson certified the shot, updated her final score sheet, and calculated her overall course performance metrics. Graduation ceremony occurred the following Monday, conducted in the base auditorium with families and command staff present. 20 candidates who'd started the course 8 weeks earlier now stood at attention, reduced from the original 23 by the expected attrition that defined special operations training. Megan stood in the front row, position earned through her ranking as honor graduate. Commander Peterson called each graduate forward individually, presenting them with certificates and assignment orders. When he reached Megan, he paused before making the standard announcement. Candidate Cruz graduates as honor graduate of this course, top ranked in overall performance across all evaluation categories. She holds the facility record for longest certified shot at 3,511 meters. She demonstrated exceptional capability, professional composure, during adverse circumstances and commitment to excellence that represents the highest standards of naval special operations. He handed her the certificate and honor graduate medal, then added statement that deviated from standard ceremony protocol. She also demonstrated courage in standing firm against discrimination, refusing to accept treatment that violated both military regulations and basic principles of fairness. Her actions triggered reforms that will benefit every candidate who follows her through special operations training. The audience applauded, the sound filling the auditorium with recognition that transcended the usual polite acknowledgement of achievement. Several senior officers stood, followed by the entire assembly, converting routine applause into standing ovation that lasted 40 seconds. After the ceremony, Megan stood at the rifle range one final time, looking across the distance to targets positioned at intervals measuring her progression through the course. Her father had taught her to shoot in Arizona desert, never imagining his daughter would break records at Naval Special Warfare Facility. Her civilian competition career had developed her technical skills, but this course had transformed her into operator qualified for combat specialties few people ever accessed. Staff Sergeant Davis approached, carrying a framed photograph he'd taken during her record-breaking shot. "Thought you might want this," he said. Captured the moment the display registered 3511. Consider it a reminder of what you accomplished here. Megan accepted the photo, studied the image showing her in shooting position with the digital display visible in the background. "Thank you for documenting everything that happened. Without your logs, Garrett would have succeeded in pushing me out." Davis shook his head. "You succeeded because you refused to quit and your capability couldn't be denied. I just made sure the truth got documented properly. That's what safety observers are supposed to do." 6 months after her graduation, the Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters hosted the first Diversity and Inclusion Training Symposium specifically designed for special operations instructors. The event drew 140 participants from various training commands across all military branches, bringing together the people responsible for evaluating candidates who sought access to the most demanding specialties in armed forces. Commander Peterson stood at the podium in the main auditorium, a presentation slide behind him showing Megan's facility record shot. He'd been selected to present the case study not because he'd been the sympathetic instructor, but because he'd been brought in after the discrimination occurred and could analyze the situation from perspective of someone who'd inherited rather than created the problem. This case demonstrates how bias can hide behind claims of maintaining standards, Peterson began. Chief Garrett and his instructor team believed they were protecting program integrity. What they actually protected was their assumption that women couldn't meet capability requirements, regardless of evidence proving otherwise. He walked the audience through the timeline, showing security footage of the ammunition tampering, playing audio of Garrett discussing need-to-break crews, and displaying the safety observation logs that documented 37 discriminatory incidents across 2 days. The presentation wasn't designed to shame anyone present, but to demonstrate how quickly legitimate training oversight could transform into systematic exclusion when bias went unchallenged. The key failure point wasn't Garrett's initial prejudice, Peterson continued. Every instructor brings personal biases to their work. The failure occurred when those biases drove actions that violated regulations, when other instructors failed to report what they observed, and when institutional systems failed to catch the pattern until outside intervention forced accountability. He presented the reforms that had been implemented service-wide following the investigation. Body cameras now recorded all instructor-candidate interactions during training. Independent observers with direct command reporting monitored exercises. Standardized evaluation criteria eliminated instructor discretion for adding requirements. Anonymous reporting systems provided candidates with avenue to report concerns without fear of retaliation. These changes aren't about lowering standards or providing special accommodation, Peterson said. They're about ensuring standards are applied equally to all candidates. Crews met and exceeded every legitimate requirement. She failed only the additional obstacles Garrett created specifically to target her. That's discrimination, not standards enforcement. The audience included several instructors who'd privately expressed concerns about diversity initiatives compromising operational readiness. Master Chief Rodriguez from Army Special Forces raised his hand during the question period. Commander, how do we distinguish between candidates who fail due to actual inability versus candidates who fail due to discrimination? The investigation in this case found clear evidence of tampering and bias. But most separations aren't that obvious. How do we ensure we're not second-guessing legitimate training decisions? Peterson nodded. Valid question. The answer is documentation and transparency. When candidate fails, there should be specific performance metrics supporting that decision. Not vague references to inability to meet standards, but concrete data showing which qualification they failed and by what margin. The reforms require that level of documentation for every separation. He clicked to another slide showing comparison data. In the 3 years before Garrett's pattern was discovered, 6 female candidates attempted this sniper course. All 6 were separated. In the 6 months since reforms were implemented, 4 female candidates have attempted the course. 3 completed successfully. 1 failed due to documented inability to maintain accuracy under stress conditions. The male success rate over the same 6-month period was 71%. Female rate was 75%. When bias is removed, performance becomes the only variable that matters. The symposium continued through the afternoon with additional presentations on implicit bias recognition, regulatory compliance requirements, and case studies from other services where discrimination investigations had revealed similar patterns. The cumulative message was clear. Special operations communities needed cultural transformation that matched their tactical evolution. During break between sessions, several instructors approached Peterson privately to discuss situations at their own facilities where they'd observed potential discrimination but hesitated to report due to uncertain chain of command response. The conversations revealed that Garrett's pattern hadn't been unique, just more blatant and better documented than similar situations elsewhere. Peterson encouraged each instructor to utilize the new anonymous reporting system, emphasizing that early intervention prevented situations from escalating to court-martial level. The goal wasn't to punish every instance of bias, but to correct behavior before it damaged careers and eliminated qualified candidates. While the symposium proceeded at headquarters, Megan had moved to her next training phase at the Special Operations Combat Diver Qualification course in Key West. The 18-week program combined underwater navigation, demolitions, maritime insertion tactics, and advanced diving medicine. She was 3 weeks into the course, one of 2 women among 37 candidates. The culture at this facility reflected the reforms that had been implemented following her previous experience. Instructors wore body cameras during all training evolutions. Safety observers monitored exercises with direct reporting authority. Evaluation criteria were posted publicly with specific performance metrics required for each qualification. The transparency eliminated ambiguity about what success required. Megan's performance placed her in the top third of the class, solid, but not exceptional in the way her marksmanship had been. The diving qualification required different skills, ones that depended more on physiological adaptation and technical knowledge than the natural aptitude she'd brought to sniper training. She worked harder here than she'd worked at the rifle range, but the effort produced results that met standards without breaking records. The difference in her experience wasn't due to her performance variation. It was due to the institutional changes that ensured instructors evaluated her based on what she accomplished rather than assumptions about what women could accomplish. When she struggled with underwater navigation during week 5, instructors provided technical correction and additional practice time. The same support offered to every candidate who showed difficulty with specific skills. Staff Sergeant Davis had been promoted to Chief of Safety Operations for Naval Special Warfare, a position that gave him responsibility for implementing the body camera systems and observer protocols across all training facilities. He traveled between bases conducting training for safety observers, emphasizing their role as institutional integrity checkpoints rather than mere equipment monitors. During visit to the combat diver course, he observed Megan completing a nighttime underwater navigation exercise. Afterward, he asked the lead instructor for assessment of her progress. "She's solid," the instructor replied. "Not the strongest swimmer in the class, but she compensates with exceptional attention to technical detail. Her navigation calculations are among the most precise I've seen. She'll complete this course without difficulty." Davis noted the matter-of-fact assessment, the absence of caveats or special considerations. This was what equal treatment looked like. Evaluation based on performance, support provided based on need, success or failure determined by capability rather than demographic category. Captain Morrison received Navy Commendation Medal in ceremony held at Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters, recognition for his decisive action in investigating and stopping the discrimination pattern. His citation specifically mentioned the broader reforms his intervention had triggered, reforms that were changing culture across Special Operations Training Enterprise. During his acceptance remarks, Morrison emphasized that recognition belonged to multiple people who'd made the intervention successful. Staff Sergeant Davis for documenting the discrimination with precision that eliminated any possibility of denial. NCIS Agent Torres for conducting investigation that built irrefutable evidence package. Commander Peterson for demonstrating that high standards and equal treatment weren't contradictory goals. And Candidate Cruz, Morrison added, for refusing to accept discriminatory treatment and for performing at level that proved every assumption about limitations wrong. Her courage in reporting and her capability in performing created the foundation for everything that followed. Megan completed the combat diver qualification course in week 18, graduating with the 73% of candidates who met all performance standards. The attrition rate was consistent with historical averages, and the separation documentation for failed candidates showed specific technical deficiencies rather than vague references to inability to meet standards. The reforms were working not by reducing difficulty, but by ensuring transparency in evaluation. Her assignment orders directed her to Camp Pendleton for the Special Operations Advanced Tactical Training Program, a 6-month course that integrated skills from multiple specialties into comprehensive combat capability. The program acceptance rate was 12%, making it one of the most selective training pipelines in military service. Megan would be the only woman in a class of 47 candidates, drawn from SEAL teams, Marine Raiders, and Army Special Forces. The cultural environment at Camp Pendleton reflected lessons learned from the discrimination case that had generated service-wide attention. The training command staff had attended the diversity symposium where Peterson presented the case study. They understood that Megan's presence wasn't about political correctness or social experimentation. She'd earned her position through documented capability that met the same standards applied to every other candidate. The first week consisted of evaluation exercises designed to establish baseline capability across multiple skill domains. Megan's marksmanship scores placed her second overall in the class, behind a Marine Raider with 8 years of operational experience. Her diving scores were middle of the pack. Her land navigation and tactical decision exercises showed strong performance, but not exceptional. The lead instructor, a Navy SEAL commander named Mitchell, called her to his office after the first week evaluations. "Your overall performance profile is interesting," he said. "Exceptional in one domain, solid in others. That's actually more useful than being uniformly good at everything. Snipers who understand they have specific expertise tend to integrate better with teams than generalists who lack standout capability." Megan appreciated the assessment. "I know my primary value is precision shooting. Everything else I'm working to bring to competent level so I don't become liability in other aspects of operations." Mitchell nodded. "That's the right mindset. We're not trying to make everyone identical. We're building teams where individual strengths complement each other. Your marksmanship gives you specific role that will be valuable to whatever unit gets you after this course." By month 3 of the program, Megan had integrated fully into the candidate class, her presence no longer notable or commented upon. Training exercises focused on team coordination, with candidates rotated through different tactical roles to develop versatility. During one exercise, she served as overwatch sniper for a simulated hostage rescue, providing cover while assault team made entry on target building. Her shots eliminated 4 threat targets at distances ranging from 600 to 1,200 meters while the assault team maneuvered. The exercise controller, reviewing the simulation data afterward, noted that her precision had allowed the assault team to move more aggressively than they typically could, knowing that Overwatch had eliminated external security before they reached the breach point. This is what integration looks like, the controller told the assembled candidates during after-action review. Crews provided capability that enhanced team effectiveness. The assault team trusted her accuracy, which allowed them to execute plan more efficiently. That's how specialists contribute to unit success. One candidate, an Army Special Forces sergeant with 12 years of service, approached Megan after the review. "I'll admit I had doubts when I heard we'd have a female candidate in this course. But watching you work changed my perspective. You're not here because of some diversity mandate. You're here because you can shoot better than 99% of operators I've worked with." Megan accepted the comment without extended discussion. Performance was its own argument, more effective than any policy statement or statistical analysis about gender integration. The candidates in this course evaluated each other based on what they observed during exercises, and what they observed from her was consistent accuracy under conditions that challenged even experienced operators. The Naval Special Warfare Command conducted a comprehensive review of training outcomes in the year following the discrimination case and resulting reforms. The data showed several significant findings that supported the effectiveness of the new accountability systems. Female candidate success rates across special operations training programs had increased from 21% to 68%. Male success rates had remained stable at 72%. The convergence suggested that previous disparities had reflected discriminatory treatment rather than inherent capability differences. Separations citing vague inability to meet standards had decreased by 83% across all programs. Instructors who knew their decisions required specific documentation tended to provide more thorough technical training and clearer feedback, which improved outcomes for all candidates regardless of demographic background. Anonymous reporting system had received 47 complaints in the first year, with 19 triggering formal investigations. 12 investigations found evidence of discriminatory treatment, resulting in instructor removals and additional training for entire staff at affected facilities. The system was catching problems earlier before patterns became as systematic as what Garrett had practiced. The review also examined operational readiness concerns that some senior officers had expressed about the reforms. Would increased accountability reduce instructor willingness to maintain high standards? Would social pressure compromise evaluation rigor? The performance data from graduates suggested neither concern had materialized. Operators completing reformed training programs showed combat readiness metrics identical to historical averages, with several units reporting improved team cohesion due to more diverse skill sets. Commander Peterson, who had taken permanent position as Special Warfare Training Command Officer, presented these findings to the annual Special Operations Conference attended by senior leaders from all services. His presentation emphasized that the reforms had strengthened rather than weakened training programs by eliminating discrimination that had previously excluded capable candidates, while allowing some incapable candidates to succeed through instructor bias in their favor. Accountability improves outcomes on both sides, Peterson explained. When instructors know they must document specific performance deficiencies, they can't pass candidates who don't meet standards just because they like them personally. They also can't fail candidates who do meet standards just because they don't think those candidates belong. Standards become the only relevant factor. Megan completed the Advanced Tactical Training Program in month 6, graduating in the top 15% of her class. Her final evaluation described her as exceptional marksman with solid competency in support skills, recommended for assignment to Special Operations Unit requiring precision engagement capability. The evaluation made no reference to her gender, contained no caveats or qualifications beyond technical assessment of her demonstrated abilities. Her assignment orders arrived 2 weeks later, directing her to a classified unit that conducted direct action missions in denied areas. The unit commander had specifically requested a sniper with her capability profile after reviewing her training records and speaking with Peterson about her performance characteristics. She would deploy within 8 weeks to location she couldn't disclose even to her family. Before departing for her new assignment, Megan returned to the rifle range where she'd set her initial records. Commander Peterson had arranged for the facility to install a permanent display board showing facility records, with photographs and performance data for the top shots in various categories. Her photograph appeared 3 times. Longest single shot at 3,511 meters, highest average across qualification course at 3,156 meters, and youngest operator to achieve qualification on first attempt at age 23. The board included one additional element that Peterson had insisted on including: a plaque describing how Megan's performance and courage had triggered reforms that transformed special operations training across all military services. The plaque concluded with a statement that would greet every future candidate who entered the facility. Standards that protect capability while eliminating bias create the strongest operators. Performance is the only credential that matters. 18 months after Megan's graduation from sniper qualification, the rifle range facility conducted its first training cycle under Commander Peterson's fully implemented reform protocols. The new candidate class included 7 women among 42 total candidates, the highest female participation rate in the program's history. Word had spread through military networks that the facility now evaluated candidates based on performance rather than prejudice, attracting women who previously would have avoided applying due to reputation for hostile environment. Peterson stood at the observation tower watching the first day qualifications, noting how dramatically the atmosphere had shifted from the culture that had existed under Garrett's command. Instructors provided technical corrections without undertones of bias. Male candidates treated female candidates as competitors rather than anomalies. The body cameras that initially felt intrusive had become accepted equipment that nobody questioned. Staff Sergeant Davis, now overseeing safety operations from his expanded role, walked the firing line with the same methodical attention he'd brought to documenting Megan's treatment. The difference was that his logs now recorded training progression and equipment status rather than discrimination incidents. In 18 months of reformed protocols, he'd filed 0 reports of discriminatory treatment at this facility. One of the new female candidates, a petty officer named Rodriguez, approached the firing line for her first qualification attempt. She'd scored expert marksman in basic training and had won civilian competitions in her home state of Texas before enlisting. Her hands were steady as she settled into position, calculated windage and elevation, controlled her breathing. The shot registered at 2,973 meters. Excellent performance for a first attempt, well above the minimum qualification standard of 1,200 meters. Peterson marked her score sheet, noted her technique, provided brief feedback about sight picture optimization that could improve her next shot. Rodriguez's performance drew no special attention beyond normal instructor observation. She was one candidate among 42 evaluated on the same criteria applied to everyone else. This normalcy represented the most significant victory of the reforms that had emerged from Megan's experience. Equal treatment had become default rather than exception. The reforms had expanded beyond the Naval Special Warfare Command to influence training protocols across all military services. The Army Special Forces Qualification Course had implemented similar body camera requirements and independent observer systems. Marine Corps reconnaissance training had adopted the standardized evaluation criteria and anonymous reporting mechanisms. Air Force Special Operations had revised their separation procedures to require specific documentation rather than vague assessments. The cumulative effect was measurable in data that Pentagon analysts compiled for annual readiness reports. Female participation in special operations training programs across all services had increased from 4% to 19% over 18 months. Success rates for both male and female candidates had improved slightly, suggesting that accountability systems benefited all candidates by ensuring consistent standards application. Several of the women who'd previously been separated from Garrett's program under discriminatory circumstances had accepted offers to return to training under reform protocols. Two had successfully completed qualification and received operational assignments. One had decided not to return, explaining that the experience of discrimination had permanently damaged her trust in military training institutions despite the reforms. Peterson understood that response. Reforms couldn't undo harm already inflicted, couldn't restore time and opportunities lost to bias. They could only prevent future harm and provide some measure of accountability for past misconduct. It was imperfect justice, but represented significant progress from the system that had allowed Garrett to operate unchecked for years. Chief Petty Officer Garrett completed his 18-month confinement at the Regional Military Correctional Facility, emerging with dishonorable discharge that ended his military career and complicated his prospect for civilian employment. He'd been required to attend discrimination awareness training during confinement, though observers questioned whether someone who demonstrated such systematic bias could genuinely change perspective rather than simply learn to hide it more effectively. His post-military life reflected the consequences of choices he'd made. Background checks for security-related employment revealed his dishonorable discharge and court-martial conviction for discrimination and evidence tampering. Veterans' benefits were unavailable due to his discharge status. The career he'd built over 15 years had been destroyed by decisions made during 2 days when he'd let bias override judgment. The other 3 instructors who'd participated in the discriminatory treatment had received lesser punishments but faced similar career limitations. Williams had been transferred to non-training duty at reduced rank. Chun had separated from service voluntarily rather than accept the restricted assignment options available with disciplinary action in his record. Rodriguez remained in the Navy, but in an administrative position that eliminated contact with trainees. Megan deployed to her classified unit, conducting operations she couldn't discuss with anyone lacking appropriate security clearances. Her performance in operational environment matched what she'd demonstrated during training. Precision shooting at extreme range under combat conditions, integrated support for team missions, professional competence that earned respect from operators who measured worth through demonstrated capability rather than demographic categories. She received Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Combat Distinguishing Device for actions during a classified operation, though the citation provided no details beyond vague reference to exceptional performance under hostile conditions. The medal joined the honor graduate recognition from her sniper qualification and her service record, documenting a trajectory from trainee to combat operator that had required capability, courage, and persistence through systematic discrimination. On the 2-year anniversary of her record-breaking first shot, the Naval Special Warfare Command hosted ceremony dedicating the renamed facility. The rifle range would now be called the Merit Excellence Training Center, emphasizing the principle that capability rather than bias should determine who succeeded in special operations programs. Peterson spoke at the ceremony, with Morrison and Davis present, along with several of the women who'd completed qualification under reform protocols. 2 years ago, this facility had a problem, Peterson said to the assembled operators and trainees. Talented candidates were being excluded through discrimination disguised as standards enforcement. One candidate refused to accept that treatment and had the capability to prove the standards excuse was false. Her courage, combined with safety observer who documented the truth and commander who acted decisively, triggered reforms that transformed not just this facility, but special operations training across our military. He gestured to the memorial plaque being unveiled near the range entrance. This facility now represents commitment to genuine merit, to standards that measure capability without regard to demographic category, to accountability that ensures bias can't hide behind claims of excellence. Every candidate who trains here will know they're being evaluated fairly, and every operator who graduates will know they earned their position through demonstrated performance. The audience included current candidates from multiple training courses, among them Rodriguez and 6 other women who were pursuing special operations qualifications under protocols that gave them fair chance to succeed or fail based on their own abilities. They represented the practical implementation of principles that had been articulated through policy documents, but made real through systematic reforms. After the ceremony, Peterson walked the rifle range one final time before retiring from active duty. 28 years of service, the last 2 spent rebuilding a training program culture that had allowed discrimination to flourish through institutional indifference. He'd like to believe the reforms would persist, that accountability systems would prevent future bias, that merit would remain the standard by which candidates were measured. But he understood that institutional progress required constant attention, that bias could adapt and hide behind new justifications, that equality demanded vigilance rather than assumption. The reforms were structure, not guarantee. They created possibility for fair treatment without ensuring it would always occur. The best insurance against backsliding was the operators themselves, the candidates who trained under reformed protocols and knew what equal treatment looked like. They would enter instructor positions eventually, would supervise future candidates, would make decisions about who succeeded and who failed. If they'd internalized the lesson that capability transcended demographic categories, they would perpetuate culture that valued performance over prejudice. Megan stood at her deployment location halfway around the world, unaware of the ceremony dedicating the facility where she'd set records and triggered reforms. She was preparing for a mission that would launch at dawn, checking equipment and reviewing tactical plans with her team. The discrimination she'd faced had become a historical event in her personal narrative, significant for what it had taught her about institutional courage, but not defining for who she was as operator. Her identity was sniper, teammate, professional warrior who'd earned position through demonstrated capability. The reforms that had resulted from her experience mattered because they created opportunity for others. But she measured her own worth through missions accomplished and teammates protected rather than through social impact she generated. That night, as candidates around the world prepared for training that would test their limits, the story of the rookie who'd outshot 4 Navy SEALs served as a reminder that standards protecting genuine capability while eliminating bias created the strongest operators. Performance remained the only credential that ultimately mattered, and institutions that recognized that truth built forces worthy of the operators who served within them.